The point of doing our healing work is to be able to live a life that aligns with who we really are. And something that I've been thinking about lately is how hard it is to live life truly alive. Alive, self-actualized people make society uncomfortable because they're really not controllable. This past weekend, I completed my very first endurance ride with my mare, Salsa. This was something that I had wanted to do for a long time, and I finally had the opportunity. I got an invitation from a friend, and I jumped on it kind of last minute. So it was really fun to go out and ride my horse. We did 30 miles, and riding through this open desert with the smell of sagebrush just wafting through the air and this just wide open horizon with some gorgeous slate blue clouds and rim rock. It was so beautiful. I really felt in the moment. I felt truly alive. And after the ride, I was talking with a friend and I mentioned that I felt more mentally, physically, and emotionally well than I had in a while. My equilibrium on all levels was great, and I just felt whole and complete. And then I started to think about coming back to regular life, and I realized that there's a pattern that I've noticed both in myself and others where I will do healing work and I will come to a place where I'm doing things that truly align with me, that make me feel alive, that things are really working for me. And then I will dive into something that sort of mutes or suppresses that. And I find this very interesting. I don't call it self-sabotage. I actually don't believe in self-sabotage. But what I do think happens is that our aliveness can make other people very uncomfortable. Aliveness is very disruptive, and alive, self-actualized people don't really fit into systems. So a story that I think about a lot is something that I heard my friend Rupert Isaacson talk about, which is the bushmen of Africa. He spent quite a bit of time with them, and one of the things he mentioned, I believe it was in a podcast interview, though I cannot remember which one, was that the bushmen in Africa make very terrible employees. And one of the reasons that that's true is that from a very young age, the bushmen are really training their children to make decisions and be self-actualized. So when, for example, they go out on a hunt, they bring the children along, and it's not just toting kids along because they don't have babysitters. They actually involve them in the hunt. They ask them questions. They talk about the tracks that they're seeing and which animal should we follow and when do you think this animal was here. And they actually have the kids engage in the decision-making around the hunt, which will then feed the tribe, just as one example. So when these children grow up, they're very self-actualized and they make bad employees. So he talked about, for example, if they go to a farm and they decide to take a position there for whatever reason, it fulfills a short-term need or they find it interesting, that they have a tendency to kind of come and go very suddenly. They don't necessarily slot themselves into the employment system that we are so used to, where, you get a job and you do what you're told and you have to have these hours and you can't screw up because then you'll get fired. And so oftentimes they're seen as somewhat flaky, not because they're actually really flaky, but because they're living by a different value system. And that value system is one where they are really whole people unto themselves, which is what I consider a self-actualized person. And I think about this a lot because one thing I've noticed for myself is that when I get to that very alive place, it rubs against other people. It can have the effect of causing them to have to face up to their own numbness. And I don't think it's always even conscious, but they will tend to project their own internal glass ceiling and their own internal limitations onto me in such a way that I was raised in the same system. Sometimes it affects me and I will take that on, and I will most likely subconsciously make decisions that will tamp down that life force energy because it's uncomfortable to make other people uncomfortable. And this is what we're taught to do from a young age in our system. When I went to school, I remember on my kindergarten report cards, my mom kept all my report cards, and I read them when I was a teenager. On my kindergarten report cards, there were stories of me singing and helping in class and just being a very vibrant child. And then as I got older, I was listed as disruptive. And then I sort of disappeared. And I just became a bland pleasure to have in class. And it was a really sad journey to read. Honestly, it kind of guts me to think about because I could really see the way in which I was taught to become small and agreeable and manageable, that I was taught to suppress my aliveness, to keep it under wraps. But I think this is one of the reasons why people will often get into healing work initially to help themselves to feel better, to resolve internal agitation, anxiety, stress, trauma, whatever it is, and then stay in healing work. Jumping from modality to modality, even when the work is working, even when they're actually getting results. Sometimes it's a temporary high and you feel better for a minute and then it kind of wears off. But sometimes you actually do get tangible change and yet you still kind of keep looking for the answer. And I don't think that it's necessarily more healing work that is needed. The point of healing work isn't to stay there forever, but to come fully alive. And once you are fully alive, yeah, sure, you need to tend to yourself the same way you'd pull the occasional weed from a garden, or water the flowers, or enrich the soil. You do that for yourself too, but so many people get into healing work and they're on this sort of treadmill where they just keep bouncing from healing modality to healing modality. And when the temporary highs wear off, or when they even get legitimate results, but then they bump up against other people being uncomfortable in the face of their aliveness, they somehow slide back into behaviors that numb and suppress because, as I said, alive, self-actualized people make society uncomfortable. And it's uncomfortable to make other people uncomfortable. We sacrifice our aliveness so that others don't have to look their numbness and apathy in the face. But we heal so we can live, not so that we can heal forever. So if you've done the healing work, but you're still feeling like something's not clicking, like you're not able to live the life that aligns with who you really are, maybe more healing work isn't the next step. Maybe it's more life, more of what lights you up. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know how this landed for you in the comments, and I will see you in the next video.